Finally finishing up with the browning process. As you can see, everything is evenly cooked. Nothing stuck to the bottom. We come along over here. We're going to move in towards the next ingredients that I have. What I'll do is take all of my ground beef, put it in a pan separate. Separate all of the ground beef from the skillet. Set it to the side. Next thing that we'll talk about is going to be the Velveeta cheese, moving right along. As you can see, it's the original Velveeta cheese. Velveeta cheese has a temperature that it melts at, which is at 250 degrees. This causes it from sticking, like we talked about earlier. What I like to do is cube up the Velveeta cheese. I cut it into fours. Once I cut it into fours, I have the knife blade going down the center and the side, which basically gives me cubes of 4, like so. Take that, set it to the side. Take it, set it to the side. And guess what? We're taking it and setting it to the side. The last thing we'll talk about, which will be the rotel, like we spoke about earlier. The rotel is just basically a mixture of your diced tomatoes and green chilies and things of that nature. I've seen people in the past substitute some of the ingredients for your health conscious personnel. You can either utilize the ground beef or your ground turkey. Ground turkey, like I said, has 85% less saturated fat than your ground beef. If you're lactose intolerant or anything of the sort, you can get a lower grade of cheese or what have you. You can get the low fat cheese. But for optimal mixing purposes, the Velveeta cheese is the way to go. The rotel, like we was talking about, you can have it in hot, mild, or medium. I chose to do the medium because it just really sits really well on your palate. It's not too bland and it's not too hot. Finally, the Tostito scoops. We'll talk about that later. That is definitely a delight. First thing, next process, what we'll do is move it along here. You can see I have the crock pot sitting out. The crock pot, the reason I like this crock pot is because it has a setting on it, off, low, and high. The whole time I've been preparing this dish, I've had it sitting on high so it'll already be warm. If you zoom in here, it's a layering process that comes afterwards. I take the ground beef, I put it in the crock pot, like so. I'm scooping the ground beef, layering the bottom portion of the crock pot. Once I layer the bottom portion of the crock pot, I make sure everything is evenly spaced in the bottom of it. The next thing that I will take, which will be my blocks of cheese. I take my blocks of cheese, I layer it in the bottom of the crock pot like so. While I'm layering it, I'm observing, making sure that nothing is sticking, nothing is cooking too fast. The next thing that we're going to put in, you guessed, is going to be the rotel. I take my rotel, as you can see I already have it open. I put it in, scooping it in, mixing it around. The rotel acts as like a device that liquefies all of the ingredients in here. If you want your rotel to be thick or what have you, you don't put as much juice in it. And you also put more cheese in it as well. Everything is in here. Nice layering process going on here. We come right back to the beginning where we started, which is once again the ground beef. We put the ground beef in, scooping it out. This is going to take almost all of my ground beef. Next thing, this will be my cheese. I take the cheese out that I cut up previously. I set it in like so. Finally, moving along to my last can of rotel that I put in. The longer you leave the ingredients inside the crock pot, the more liquefied the contents inside are going to become. If you leave it on high all day, it's going to cause all the cheese to melt at an accelerated pace, and it's going to make the ground beef become more liquefied. Once I have all my ingredients in, I leave it on high for a little while. I set the lid on top, and everything is basically good to go from there. The conclusion of everything basically, like I said, the ingredients are, actually we have a little more ground beef left finish up putting the ground beef on top, putting the lid on, and that's basically it in a nutshell. Okay, as you can see, to conclude everything, I have my cheese, I have the ground beef, the lean, as well as the cheese and the chips, everything else. Everything is relatively simple to make, from the ground beef to the browning process to the cheese to the rotel. Like I said, if you're health conscious or what have you, you can substitute some of the ingredients, the ground beef for the ground turkey. It has a more lean effect. Lactose intolerant, you can substitute the Velveeta cheese with the regular cheese.